We are back on the study here of overcoming worldliness. The author of the outline is Heath Rogers, affectionately known as Mr. Rogers when we talk about him every once in a while. Gambling. Now, this is something you don't hear taught too often, right? Maybe in the olden days, maybe it was discussed more. Perhaps now things have been, I don't know. People have always gambled, right? I mean, gambling, it's just now more obvious maybe. It's legal in more places in more ways. It's probably difficult to find a state in the United States that doesn't have some kind of gambling, whether it be lottery, outright casinos. The sports betting now is even bigger and more legal than it's ever been. So it's still a little confusing to me. There's a whole bunch of these different companies out there that you can get online, right? And you can pick but it may vary according to what state you're in, whether you can do that. It's a little complicated, but in any event, no doubt about it, gambling is a big thing. As a matter of fact, in the outline, it points out here, and I'm not sure exactly how, it's probably fairly recent figures here, but it's estimated that about 60% of Americans gamble every year. Now again, gambling's a pretty broad term, right? In fact, some would say the stock market's a form of gambling, right? We'll discuss that a little bit as well, but we'll, for the moment, leave that out. I don't think I know from the reading his outline, he's not referring to that as part of the gambling situation. But the lottery is a big one. You know what I'm saying? That really the institution of lotteries all across the United States, and most of it was done in the name of what? What were they trying to help? Supposedly?
Children.
Right? Education, right? And we've all been to Publix and convenience stores and stuff, and is it not a hassle sometimes? I like it when they have a dedicated person to handle the lottery, because you're just wanting to buy a soda or something, and this person, picking out 500 different lotto numbers or something for the night. It's out there, it's an issue, and it's something we need to look at. According to his information here, 80% of Americans approve of legalized gambling. So according to him, most people, when it comes time to a vote or whatever, they say we're okay with it. And it's estimated that billions of dollars every year are spent on some form of gambling here. One thing he says here in the intro, and we'll revisit this here later, but he says one could buy a lottery ticket at the corner convenience store, take part in an office pool, especially as we're getting close to what event coming up here, maybe in about a month. What is it? Well, Super Bowl, that's one. What's another big office pool, though? And it goes on for like 2 or 3, 4 weeks. March Madness, basketball. In fact, I've heard that they're talking about possibly expanding that to a bigger field. People like to see the little guys upset the big guys and maybe expand it even more and have more games that are surprise outcomes and stuff. But here's the last part he says, or even engage in church-sponsored gambling activities. Now, how many have been to the Bible camp fundraiser in the spring, right? Okay, we'll revisit that, right? But that kind of, okay. Well, but we'll revisit that and look at a few things related to it. What is gambling? What is gambling? I mentioned kind of halfway tongue-in-cheek about the stock market being a gamble, and as Mr. Rogers points out in his outline here, when you use the term gamble too broadly, it can be a little, not really reasonable. For example, we gamble, you might say, every time you get in your car and drive, you're gambling that you're going to make it there alive. You know what I'm saying? Now, there used to be a road where Jen and Tom and Don and I, where we grew up, maybe some of you have been there, they used to call it Bloody 520. And I remember they used to have bumper stickers, like, pray for me, I drive Bloody 520. And it went through Cocoa, Merritt Island, all the way over to Orlando. And it was a 2-lane road at that time, but parts of it were at least. And it was known for lots of fatal accidents and stuff, I don't know, I haven't been on it much lately. But it's true that every time you get behind the wheel of a car, you are taking a chance there. But is that really the kind of gambling we're referring to? No. He actually has a definition that he got from uslegal.com, and according to that, it says a person engages in gambling if he or she stakes or risks something of value upon the outcome of a contest of chance or a future contingent event not under his or her control or influence, upon an agreement or understanding that he or someone else will receive something of value in the event of a certain outcome. Okay, so it goes on to say, that sounds like a lawyer wrote it, right?
Yeah.
Gambling does not include, however, bona fide business transactions valid under the law of contracts, such as the purchase or sale at a future date of securities or commodities, contracts of indemnity or guarantee, and life, health, or accident insurance, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So his thesis, the outline here, the gentleman who put this together, he would say the stock market is not really outright gambling, but there could be some principles related to what we're going to study tonight that you could apply to that in some cases. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. He does point out in the outline that the word gambling does not appear in the Bible, that term. Now, I'm looking over my scholar here who spent a lot. There's probably some things that when casting of lots, et cetera, that you can find in the Bible, that maybe deal with that. But as far as, it doesn't quite examine it in the sort of way that we can just go to very quickly and say, oh, right there, it says it right here, it's over. No question about it, no discussion needed. But the Bible does set forth, as we obviously know, principles that can maybe guide us, actually should guide us, when we look at the issue of gambling. And I'll be honest with you, when it comes to this issue of gambling, I'm a little bit, it's kind of like when we talked about, whether you can wear shorts that are a little above your knee or not. You know what I'm saying? These are the principles. We're going to look at what the Bible says and stuff. If you buy a scratch-off lottery ticket next week and I find out about it, I'm not going to come and hunt you down and say you shouldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's, to me, some of this may be a little hazy, but we'll see. Let's go look at it. I'm not going to state any exact belief about it right now, but I'm just saying, understand this. We look through this, this stuff is maybe not quite as black and white in every instance as some things that you could find in the Bible. We'll put it that way. Let's go on. Let's look at.
Brother, give me your clicker.
All right. Next week we're going back to me trying to do it again. I'm not used to it. We'll get back to it. Appreciate it. How many? We didn't get too far. We got the definition. All right, here we are. This is where I wanted to be. Right here, exactly. I set you up well there, didn't I? What's that?
That scratches us starting a gambling on whether or not you'll
Yeah, right. Are y'all doing that? They're doing it online right now in China somewhere, right? Oh, yes, he's not going to do it. Right? Making a killing on me, I'll tell you what. It's like puts and calls and shorts and longs like that. All right, but here's what we do know. Principles. Let's talk about some of the principles in the Bible that can guide us here when we look at gambling. One is the question of whether gambling is an authorized means of gaining wealth, right? The Bible actually addresses ways that are acceptable to God for people to gain wealth. Let's look at one of them real quick here. Let's look real quick at 1 Peter. We'll actually look at a few scriptures here. 1 Peter 4, and we'll read verse 10 real quick here. As each one of us has, that's for the next one. Let's go to Ephesians 4:28. I apologize. I'm going to put my finger there because that's going to deal with the next principle. Let's go back to Ephesians 4:28, if you don't mind. And it says, let him who stole steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need. So obviously we know working is a good way to gain wealth, but there's some others. Here's another one. We can make money when we sell something, right? Don't sell dope, on the street corner or whatever. But if you sell something honest and legal, that's another authorized means. I'm not going to read the actual scripture here, but look at Matthew 13:44, Acts 4:34 through 37. What's another way? Another authorized way. I'll go ahead and have you all interact with me here. What's another authorized way that you can gain wealth, according to the Bible? We've talked about work a job or make money that way, sell something that's legitimate, and what would be a couple of others? This outline lists 4 of them. What's another way that you can legitimately gain wealth, and God is not going to frown upon that?
Labor.
Well, we said labor. That's number 1.
Inheritance.
Yo, it's not up here. That's the one right below 1 there. What's another way though that you could gain wealth legitimately? Inherit, exactly. I'm not going to ask how many to raise your hands. I've inherited some stuff from my parents. I'm grateful that they had enough money when they died that I was able, I'll be honest with you, I would much rather they be here with me still, right? I'll be honest, from that standpoint. It's one of those things where it's a nice thing, but you wish they were around longer, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And what's the last one? We're getting close to a certain holiday coming up here real quick. For us men especially need to keep this in mind.
Groundhog Day.
Keep doing it over and over again. Like me not being able to use the clicker. No, what's a gift? Right, a gift. That's legitimate. Again, if you've got a rich uncle who wants to leave you $1 million, God's okay with that. He's not going to frown on that. Somebody wants to give you a gift, you may accept it. Now there may be some cases where that's not true. If it's some weird circumstance, by accepting that gift. I don't know if somebody has made their money illegitimately and they want to gift you might object to that. But generally speaking, those are ways here. Well, here's another principle here. So we talk about earn it by gaining wealth in a legitimate way. What's another way, another principle that gambling might violate? Another sort of principle. It might be up there already. Stewardship. And that's a big one. That's a real big one in the standpoint of, we all have a certain stewardship. If you have, at your job, you have certain things you got to take care of. In your household, you need to be a steward, a good steward. Unfortunately, when it comes to gambling, and especially those who take it to that extreme, and a certain number are going to do that. It's kind of like I've heard Brian preach about, you're not an alcoholic now, but once you start drinking and enjoying that habit or whatever, it becomes more ingrained. It becomes something you can't even control at some point. And gambling, a certain number of people, that's going to be them as well. They're going to be down there, and they become a bad steward. Here, let's go to 1 Peter 4:10, what I wanted to read a few moments ago, and we'll read something there. 4:10 of 1 Peter. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. And the thing about it, of course, is that, are you really, when you're putting money at risk in an outright game, gambling on the outcome of a football game, or even something that's even more insane, just pulling a lever, right, and seeing what winds around. I'll be on, a little confessional here. I remember Dawn and I were down, I think it was in the Bahamas, this was years ago. And I was playing some slot machines. I just want to, I think I said I'm going to spend this amount of money when I go to the casino. I don't know enough to play poker and all those other exotic stuff you see on James Bond and stuff, but I did know how to pull a lever, right, and put in something. And I think every night I did it. I bottomed out every night. I had no more money. What I said I was going to spend that night, I spent it. I maybe got up a little bit, then I went down, and by the it was up. I didn't have the money anymore. Nonsense. That taught me a big lesson there in and of itself here. Remember, the odds are in the favor of the house. Long term. There's a guy, I won't mention his name because some of you might know him. He's an athletic coach, or I think he's now an athletic director in an institution somewhere in this 3 or 4 county area. But he's from Merritt Island. He was a guy that played football at Merritt Island. I know every once in a while on Facebook, I'll see him post something, and it's somebody's hand, and he's holding up a whole bunch of $100 bills, right? And when I do that, I know where he's been. He's been to the Mississippi Gulf Coast to play poker, right? Apparently, now I don't know, maybe he's going more than I know, and he's not always posting when he loses, you know what I'm saying? But he posts when he wins, so I made, $800 last night, whatever, That's a little misleading, isn't it? That's a little misleading. A lot of folks that aren't posting online that are losing that much. I certainly didn't post when I lost whatever and I certainly wasn't dealing with hundreds of dollars, but whatever my little pittance that I was playing with at the slot machine, I didn't post about that, obviously. Probably shouldn't be mentioning it in church either, but oh well, we got to admit our faults sometimes. So it's not a good thing from a standpoint of stewardship. Let's go on to another, though, principle here. And this one is one that's a little more, it's one thing to not be a good steward, but this is also here something that really deals with, maybe some would say, emotions, the heart, treating people in a certain way, and that's brotherly love, having brotherly love for one another. Let's look at that a passage. We can talk about that. Let's go to Matthew chapter 7, if you would. Matthew 7. And we'll look at verse 12, if you would. Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. And the outline points out here is this, that basically in gambling, for someone to win, others must lose, right? Now, it's true, you play a football game, somebody's got to lose as well, so, we don't always win at things. But in this case, your gain, your tangible monetary gain, is directly out of somebody else's. You didn't do anything to earn it. You didn't go and wash their, car for them or paint their house or something. You just got into this contest. Now, this is what Mr. Rogers says about it. He says this: some call gambling stealing by consent because the losers are willing participants, but it is still stealing. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know if I can agree with that. To me, if you want to, now whether or not it's biblical or scriptural, I'm not addressing that particular issue at the moment, but whether it's outright stealing, no. If I consent to go into a match, I say, if I beat you in arm wrestling, I'll give you $5. If I beat you, if you beat me, whatever, we have this thing. That's not stealing, okay? That's your agreeing to place your bet. I don't consider that stealing. Sorry. Does anyone disagree with me? Is that stealing? I mean, are you, when you win at the lottery, you go down there and get your scratch off and you win $100. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of people all over the state of Florida, that same, whatever time period, they're playing their thing, shelling out their money. It's being funded by other people's money. But is that really stealing? I'm okay with a counter opinion here. Yeah.
I think Greg, just using preacher mind on some of this, I think it's the issue of, we all agree that we're going to get ripped off. We know the house is going to steal from us by consent. What we're really hoping for is that this is our time to not be on the losing end.
Right.
And that, and that's, at the end of the day, who's the big winner with the lottery?
State.
The state. The state sets it up so that you lose more than you win in terms of times and money. And it's a voluntary tax that didn't have to pass as a tax.
Right.
That you're seduced to being ripped off with the lie that it was ever going to be used for what they said it was, and that you were ever going to break even. And so, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but from the cycle of once you get in that loop of self-deception, whether it's the government, the mafia, or a legal corporation, that by RICO statutes, all those companies are engaging in racketeering, but because they file business licenses, they can rip people off in Vegas all day long. And why do you go to Vegas? To be sinful, to be wicked, in the hope that you'll come back with more than you left with.
And we'll deal with that sinfulness and wickedness in association with gambling is another issue that's brought up. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I guess, to me, stealing is a very bold word. You know what I'm saying? Like, to steal generally means take it without somebody. It's kind of like a boxing match. It's not really assault and battery. You're agreeing to fight one another. Okay, it may not be a wise thing, but you're okay with it. It's I don't know, but
I wouldn't use his definition, because you and I both know there's a definition for robbery.
Yeah, right.
There's a definition for burglary, and there's a definition for theft. And all burglaries and all robberies involve theft, but not all theft is robbery and burglary.
And I don't want to be a supporter of the nanny state, but I think in this instance of gambling, there is some truth to the idea of, we have to ask the question, how many children are not having the sort of things they should in their life to help them be well and, have good food and stuff like that, because one of their parents is shelling out a lot of money on lotto. And so, there's one of the arguments against the lottery is that it disproportionately, kind of preys upon those who don't necessarily have as much education or wealth and whatnot. I mean, do you think you see guys or women pulling up in real nice cars, look like they just walked out of a business office, selling out a bunch of money at the counter for lotto tickets? Do you see that very often? Or does it sometimes strike you when you see somebody getting, especially that big roll of them, that maybe this is somebody who could be using that money in a better way? And man, if you're going to put money away somewhere, put it in the stock market, put it in a bank account, whatever. Try to make a little interest rather than trying to win the lottery. But
Greg.
yes, sir.
Kyle had a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Hey, the, first thing, the only way for one to win at gambling is for another to lose.
Yeah.
When I was 16, I was teaching Sunday school, and one of my children was sick, so mom and daddy carried me to see him. The father had a gambling addiction,
Yeah.
and they were living 3 children and the mother in a one-room house, and one-room place, and it just turned my head against. I don't believe in well, they all know at the women's club, I don't buy the
Raffle tickets and stuff. Yeah.
that's gambling.
No, I know there's an argument for that for sure.
The
Yeah.
point is that those children and that mother lost because of that gambling.
Yeah.
And it's just like taking a drink. When you first take a drink, you don't know you're going to become an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's what we were mentioning earlier, exactly. Well, one thing that I think I read here, I have to look, it may not be in this exact sheet here, but I think he mentioned a statistic that if you are addicted to gambling, you're considered a problem gambler, you're 20 times more likely to commit suicide than your average person. And the thing about gambling that I think makes that especially true is because, the mind, the conscience, even of somebody who's kind of by this point mind maybe just kind of warped a little because of their addiction, but when you realize you've spent the last bit of money that you were going to have for your children and you feel the guilt of that, it comes down on you pretty hard, I think, and they just say the only way out, or in some cases I have no doubt they cannot afford to pay their gambling debts, right? And they're just like, I'm desperate, I'm going to be killed anyway. I can't, back when it was more of the loan sharks and all this stuff going on. There's still some of that, but I mean, where it wasn't quite so out in the open and legal. But that's pretty dramatic. 20 times more likely to commit suicide than an average person. That'll show you the problems with that. All right, any other statements before we go on to another issue here? We're going to look at a couple more principles, you might say.
A lot of us in this room were raised by the biggest gamblers in the world. That's farmers.
Oh, right.
And, I mean, you're gambling whenever you buy seed corn and put it in the ground.
Well, and the author of the outline addresses that. He does distinguish from that standpoint of everything you take risks. You open any business, you open a store, there's a gamble to it. But I know what you're saying, especially in the agricultural field, because well, you tell me, how many farmers play the futures market and stuff? Is that something farmers do, or do they just get the sign up, whatever they got to do to get the money at the end of the?
Some farmers play futures. Stephen Dixon and I were not allowed to buy futures.
You weren't allowed to buy futures on.
USDA, we cannot buy futures.
You're considered insider trading, maybe, right?
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go on to another thing. What's another problem with gambling here? And that is greed. The issue of greed. Let's look here at a Bible verse that I think is useful to look at. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 6. We'll look at verses 9 and 10. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. When I think about greed and foolishness, I think about here's another confessional moment. Back, I remember my first freshman year of college, I think it was. Do you remember airplanes? Remember the term airplanes, where you got on an airplane? It was this scam that went around. This was like in the mid to late 1980s. And there were these groups that popped up around places. And now, if you got in on it early, you did pretty well.
No, it was a straight Ponzi scheme.
They called it an airplane. They even had diagrams you could look at and stuff. This is what I was playing football in college, and it came into the football team. And I remember it was real secretive or whatever. I remember we all went to somebody's room, and there's people I didn't even know. There's a whole bunch of people in this room that came to get on, to see if they could get in on the airplane, but you had to pay like $100 for a seat on the airplane. And the idea was you got on in the back seat, you would keep moving up. Every time someone came in and put another $100 in, your seat would move up. You keep moving up, you keep moving up. And when you finally got to the pilot seat, then you collected all the money or something. I don't even remember exactly how it worked. It was crazy. I remember, I hate to say it, I gave them $100 of my money to try to get an airplane seat. And I remember they wouldn't do it out in this is a dorm room. They wouldn't even do it. We had to go in a bathroom. And I paid this guy $100 to get my stupid seat on the airplane. You guys think I'm really bad, don't you? But no, I mean, naive and stupid, right? You know? You think I ever saw any money from that? I think a week later the airplane thing was done. You know what I'm saying? Enough people lost money that but there's somebody. There were like 2 or 3 guys that probably walked off with $1,000 or something. But the rest of us, it's terrible.
Amway wasn't much different.
What's that?
Amway wasn't.
Right. Yeah, I remember one time I was sitting. No, never mind. I'm going to talk too much about stuff like that. Anyway, suffice it to say. It's the same kind of thing. What motivated me that night? Because they got the excitement going. Man, all you have to do is pay $100, and you just buy your time for a little bit, and you'll have $1,000. You get enough people on there. And what were they appealing to me for? What was the appeal? My greed? I said, I'll go for that. Sure, yeah.
But going back to the other point, but on this one, with it being legalized so big, and I watch different sports events. That like every 5th ad is one of the main gambling companies.
DraftKings, all these.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say the name of it.
Okay.
You can install it on your phone while you're watching. Link your bank account or credit card. So when you run out of money, and they're like, for your first $5 bet, we'll give you $200.
Right.
Now, last time I checked, man, 4,000% return on gambling. Right out of the gate, brother, they fixing to take you to the cleaners.
Yeah.
But once your bank account bottoms out, your bank shuts you off. But the gambling racket is set up. You can go on ahead and max out all your credit cards.
Yeah.
Well, what do when you've lost your mortgage money, you've lost your car payment, all your accounts are zero, and now you got $20,000 in credit card debt at anywhere between 12 and 25%. And some people, they'll go open new lines of credit while their credit's still intact. Right. Because they're like, I got to get out of this hole. I don't care how much they legalize it. And this is, and I mean, it's the same point with tattoos. The thing's still wrong. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's culturally accepted. Someone somewhere is making a killing. It's just not the mob anymore. Now it's legitimate businessmen with MBAs.
Right.
And what's behind it? Greed.
Yeah.
Greed.
Yeah, and then those same people say, well, I got to bet it all at the Super Bowl, right? I got to get it all I got on one thing or something to try to win it all back. It's sad. It's a pathetic thing. Let's look now. Let's move on because we're running out of time here. Let's look at some of the negative aspects of gambling that we've kind of addressed somewhat. One is it is addictive to a certain number of people. You can become addicted by it. And remember this. Let's read a verse or so here. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12. It says, all things are lawful for me, but all things are not helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. So again, the power, you're giving your power over to something, sometimes a substance, sometimes something like gambling. Do not do that. God does not want us living that way. Gambling destroys lives. Gambling destroys lives. This is where I saw the 20 times more likely to commit suicide. Also, something I said we would address a little bit here is gamblers have evil companions. They have evil companions. It says here, Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. Again, going back to that whole silly airplane thing. I was in the companion of fools there. I was with a bunch of fools. We were all fools, you know what I'm saying? And then obviously you go to Vegas, it gets even worse, right? Because they're what? Do they still give you free drinks in Vegas and stuff like that? I don't know, you know what I've only been there a couple times, but you know, it oozes a certain, you know, it's unsavory to say the least. But here's another one. Gambling contributes to other sins, right? When you're sitting there playing at the casino, whatever, you're oftentimes overindulging in alcohol and other things. It's you know, women and men getting together in casinos. I'm guessing that's not the healthiest arrangement to start a relationship as well. Notice this, though. This, now who knows, this might have been many, many years ago, but it says after casinos opened in Atlantic City, the total number of crimes within a 30-mile radius increased 100%. You know, that's kind of crazy, isn't it? But here's another one that I think is useful for a Christian especially. What did we talk about when we were talking about being modest or not modest, right? What did we say? That it's harmful to a Christian's witness, so to speak, because you know, if you're not dressing in a very chaste manner, you know, people say, what are you, a hypocrite or something? Well, when you gamble, you're kind of hurting your influence as well on somebody. Let's read a verse here. Let's go to Philippians. Let's read a couple of verses here. Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 and 15. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. You know, somebody doing a lot of gambling, perhaps any gambling, what kind of light are you? What kind of influence are you going to be when everything that surrounds that activity is as it is? You know. Now let's get into a question about practical aspects of this. Let me ask you this, Ms. Powell. You mentioned that you don't do the raffle tickets at the women's club, or we won't even say the we shouldn't be some over in Lake City, right? No. Well, a lot of religion, not necessarily. Well, some churches do it, right? Some congregations will have different raffle. What you know, raffle tickets, and I've thought about this a lot here because of my role with the camp. You know, because we do. You can win stuff. We sell tickets. You get in, you get a meal, but on top of that, they'll draw your ticket. Yes, sir.
You know, on raffles.
Yes, sir.
Okay, why am I entering it? Okay, right. If you know, because I've never gone to the barbecue.
Yes, sir.
But I always get tickets from you. Right. You know, every year I get my ticket from you.
You never won anything.
I ain't won anything. And I don't care if I win, because you're on their board. I want to support you on their board. I want to make sure that you get your part of your fundraising taken care of as a board member. I'm happy to support the Bible camp. And brother, if you draw my name out of a hat for a prize, great. If you don't, brother, by the time Saturday evening rolls around, I done forgot that it was even going. And I think there's a certain point with, quote, raffles or drawings. You know, now if I go and I buy 98% of all the tickets, right, so that I have the greatest chance of winning. Now common sense would say what? Dude, just take the list and go to the store and buy it and save your money. Right? And that's why, you know, the way Florida law is written on that, technically it's illegal to do a raffle by chance. You can ask people for a donation to what you're having a drawing on, but you cannot legally do a raffle.
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity for the drawing.
Right, you gotta be careful how you word these.
Oh, it is.
Well,
you know?
and that's my thought too on the raffle business. And I'm not condemning you if you have a different, but I do think it's different than some type of gambling in the sense of it's more just a straightforward, I want to win money. when you're going to especially a nonprofit organization trying to help a charity raise money and stuff, you would almost just hand the money over to them, right? But in this case, at least some other people have donated something of value to make it more enjoyable for people to. Now again, I'm not going to argue with someone who says that it violates my conscience. If it does, then I say, yeah, don't do it. But I would say when it comes to raffle tickets, I think because of the overall what we're trying to do, I view that a bit differently than other. Now again, I'm not the end all and be all of authority on any of these matters. You know what I'm saying? It's something to consider and stuff. But I don't know if you thought maybe I was going to say also we're not doing any more of these because no, I was kind of no, we can't do that. No, I'm just saying it is interesting though. And in our lives we have to look at different circumstances. It's not always perfectly black and white, like, it's absolutely wrong, or it's perfectly fine. A lot of times in life, right, sometimes it's a little, okay, what are the nuances here, when you're trying to do stuff. Yes, ma'am?
I want to say this in my defense.
No, I'm not trying to.
I don't buy the tickets, but I always contribute to the whatever it is
Sure.
that we're doing.
Yeah.
But I don't do the tickets.
You're actually more generous than the people that are buying the ticket. Yes, sir, back here, my brother-in-law wants to say something.
So if you look at it from like a church perspective, because when we lived in North Carolina, they did a lot of church bazaars and raffles for fundraising components for youth trips, etc. But if we look at what our role is as a Christian, to support things that are nurturing and fostering the growth and the saving of souls, if we were doing our part just in simplicity from that, the camp wouldn't have to do fundraising. You'd have all the money you needed. But we don't because we're greedy and we're worldly and we're selfish and we want that money to buy our boat or our truck or our golf clubs or whatever it may be. Pick your vice. So, yeah, it's hard. Believe me, I've had that discussion, especially in the state of the world right now. It's like, what am I doing wrong? I'd love to have another X amount of money per month, but I also have to look at what I do personally from a charitable standpoint to entities that I believe are fostering the growth of saving souls, etc., and say, you know what, that's not my money to begin with.
Right.
And again, the worldliness kicks in when you look at it on paper. You're like, wow, that'd be nice to have that extra little bit of money, etc. But if we do our job as we're supposed to do, it's not stressful, and those entities wouldn't need that money.
Right. One thing I am proud about our congregation, just as a side note here, but kind of related, is I do like the fact that when we do have certain community events and stuff, we tend to not sell stuff to make money. We tend to offer it to people just to have. I'd like that approach. I'm not saying the other is necessarily wrong, but I do like how we tend to not just try to sell stuff, but share with people. But in any event, we can talk more about that in another lesson. I appreciate your attention.
I'm gonna have to give back that 30 cents I won on the golf course.
Do what?
I'm gonna have to give that 30 cents I won on the golf course back.
But you'd be amazed how many times over the years that people in churches have wanted to do raffles or other kinds of fundraisers, and I said no. I said, I'll do 4 Sundays in a row about how y'all need to open up your pocketbooks to send the kids to camp. I said, we ain't doing raffles, and I said, and the kids ain't going door to door to sell stuff. Because that ain't how we raise money in the Lord's church. We give.
We don't have any other example except free will giving. do you?
Free will giving. And the passage that, Greg had, in Acts, where did Barnabas get his name? Barnabas had extra properties. There was a need in the church. What did he do? He went, he sold some properties, he gave it so that the brothers and sisters wouldn't be in, wouldn't have hardship. And, yeah, that's, so. What's your song, Evan? 666?
You ain't know that.
No, what's your song? I mean, 666 is a good song out of the big songbook. I thought you had one picked already.
That's what you said.
There's power in the blood. 903.
903, there's power in the blood from the big book. 903, there's power in the blood. All right. Man, I'll be glad when you're done being Willy Wonka's dad or Charlie Bucket's cousin or whatever. Because, man, them extra lines is pushing stuff out of your head, boy. I tell you what. I tell you what. All right, 903, there's power in the blood. Which verses are we singing, Evan? First and last? Or all of them?
First, third, and fourth.
First, third, and fourth. All right. All right. Yeah, we might not know the third. But, so, I try not to watch politics. I get just enough stuff in my Twitter feed to stay informed on whatever current event it is. And I read the headline and I go, eh, and then I swipe it off of my phone. And was it yesterday, Tommy, or Monday? It is in the last 2 days. Yesterday, that the White House declared that the COVID-19 and the national health emergency would be over on May 11th. And then today, apparently, the House decided that it would be over sooner than that because they were going to vote it over. Now, on one hand, we can have one set of thoughts that run through our head about that kind of thinking. I can't say what those thoughts might be because then I'd have to repent standing up here. But I'll give us a second thought. The second thought should be, oh Lord, how bad they need the gospel. Oh Lord, how bad they need the gospel. Now you'll hear some people, they'll tell you that a phone call counts for X amount. If you call your senator, your congressman, an email, they, calculate that this many voters it represents. But you know what still has the highest power when they calculate how their constituency really feels? When you sit down, actually write a real letter and send it. And I want to throw a challenge out to us. I want to throw a challenge out to you. Pick one of our elected officials. I don't care who. If it's sheriff, county judge, or if it's one of our state senators or reps, or one of our national, or the governor's office, or the secretary of agriculture. If you don't have anything bad to say about them, handwrite them a letter that says, I appreciate the job you're doing. I appreciate that you're trying to look out for our best interest. I'm praying for you. Joe Smith, Lake Butler Church of Christ, Lake Butler, Florida. We love you and we're praying for you in Jesus' name. Call it good. You say, brother, what would they think about that? It might shock them. Right? If you wrote a letter that was just polite, that said, hey, you're doing all right. I appreciate what you're trying to do. Love you, praying for you. They love me. What's wrong with them? They ain't never met me. Right? That's why I love you in the name of Jesus. Now you say, but brother, what if they're one of them stupid ones that I don't like?
They still need a blessing.
Then you politely say, dear so-and-so, I'm sure you had many reasons for voting or taking this position. I would ask that you consider, and if you have a Bible verse, this word from the scripture on that topic. I thank you in advance for your consideration. By the way, I appreciate this other thing you did. I love you, I'm praying for you, and so does our church on a regular basis. We pray for all of our elected officials, such and such, Lake Butler Church of Christ, Lake Butler, Florida. Now some of you going, when I get home, I'm going to call Ronnie and Tommy and I'm going to tell them Brother Brian has flipped his lid. He's gone crazy. But what I'm talking about is a simple way for us to be light. And instead of always praying that God would send someone else across their path, why don't you use the one means that you can to send something across their path? You say, well, they might not ever see it. Their aide will only see it. You know what happens when an aide gets something like that? They generally go, you've got to see this.
Yeah.
Because it's polite, it's encouraging. You know how I know that? Because as an elected official, all 2 times I had something nice said. The city manager shared it with me. All the bad, nasty, hateful stuff came straight to my email.
If it's handwritten, it even carries more weight.
And that's the point. When it's handwritten or even typewritten with a hand signature, Timothy tells us to pray for those in authority. I want to encourage us, let's go to the next step and let's be the voice of light in their world. Pick someone this week, drop them a short note, a short letter, a short card, thanking them for their service, giving them a word of encouragement. And if you have something you don't like, that you have a scripture, write it and just drop one verse and be done with it. And then tell them you love them and you're praying for them and sign it in the name of the Lord and His church. That's what I want to encourage you this week. Because if I've learned anything about the news media, some like 8-year-old girl saved her grandma or something this week. That was the only positive thing that came in my Twitter feed all week so far. Everything else was negative. So less than 1%. We say that people don't see the value of church. It's because we haven't shown them the value of church. If we don't show light to people in darkness, and if most of the people they come across, the light that most of the people that they have in their path, their light is also darkness, and Jesus says, how great is that darkness indeed. You and I need to be that light. You and I need to be that light. And on Sunday, I'll have about 12 cards pre-made up with some names of some different ones, but don't wait for Sunday. If you have somebody in your mind or something, go on ahead and do it before then. But I'll have about 12 on the back table on Sunday so that we can do that. And if you're here tonight, and as Brother Tommy prayed at the start, and before we get to that, do keep Donnie and Denise in prayer. Sister Denise fighting with cancer and fighting to get fluid off and trying to begin her treatments. Tommy and Sandy and I were talking before services. You know, it was just Thanksgiving, y'all. Last time we had Wednesday dinner with Donnie and Denise, with Donnie. Thanksgiving. It's been a fast 2 months. So please keep that whole family in prayer and keep the hands that minister to them. But very quick, what other prayer concerns do we have that we want to? Yes, Brother Tom.
Our family friend that's been on the prayer list,
Sue Lawler. Yes, sir.
She is transitioning into probably the last phase of her cancer battle.
Okay.
She's needing daily pain medicine and some daily assistance needs, so keep that family in prayer.
Okay. All right.
Eileen,
The Sue Lawler family. What?
Eileen,
Eileen. She is home. Getting some things worked out. As we have better updates, we'll pass that on. But if you want more details, I'm not going to talk full business. See what Sandy and who else? Sandy. Yeah. See Sandy. See Sandy. She has more details, I think, than just about anybody right now on what's going on with Sister Eileen. What else do we have that we need to be mindful of? All right. What, Phyllis? Did you have a hand ready to raise? Well, it's like you almost went out and then you drew them back. Okay. Okay.
Innocent bystander.
All right. So pray for Phyllis as an innocent bystander getting assaulted for prayer requests.
Look at doing that to him.
All right. So If you're here tonight, you know you need to be baptized. You know you need to make that transition. You know you need to come from the kingdom of the world to the kingdom of the Son. It's never going to be easier. The water's already there. There's towels. There's a change of clothes. We're here. Do not go to that day and say, I didn't have a convenient opportunity. Obeying the gospel has never been easier than it is right now. You say, but I don't care if you're young or old. Life is never certain. None of us know the date fixed for our time of death. You don't know it. None of us know the time of the Lord's return. You say to yourself, I'll come another day when it's more convenient. And of all the lessons, you do the thing now that you know you need to do. Because if you ever wait for it to be convenient, it's never going to come. So you make that decision now, because now is the only time that you've got.